and we can interact more with our audience. So we really appreciate, thanks so much to our sisters and brothers in the labor movement in Alabama. We really appreciate that. It's really helpful. And, hopefully, I believe that we can do some good with it. The goal of the show is to build the labor movement here in Alabama, in the Tennessee Valley. And so we appreciate that our sisters and brothers in the labor movement see some value in that. We've got a caller on the line now, Daniel Tate. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Energy Alabama. He co-founded the organization in 2014 to accelerate the state's transition to sustainable energy. And he is on the line to talk to us about Alabama Power's ridiculous rates of profits compared to comparable utilities in other states, and the fact that they are now they're moving forward with plans to cut off power for poor people in Alabama in the midst of a pandemic. So, Daniel, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate your time. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, I definitely appreciate the opportunity to speak. And yeah, I mean, you said it exactly right. I mean, Southern Company, which is the parent company of Alabama Power, and they also own, some other utilities like Georgia Power, Mississippi Power, and, some other types of affiliated entities around the greater Southeast. But it's an extremely profitable company. And as you mentioned, Alabama Power is actually either the or one of the most profitable utilities in the entire country. And I don't think it's a shock to, y'all or any of your listeners that Alabama is one of the poorest states in the country. And that's been the case for quite some time. And so it's kind of a crazy juxtaposition, right, that you have some of the poorest residents in the country that are paying the highest utility bills in the country, supporting one of the most profitable utilities, and ultimately that money is being shipped out of Alabama and going to shareholders on Wall Street as opposed to regular folks here in the state. And so, I was talking about this the other day, and I think that's, when you, Jacob, and I were talking about it, just that last quarter alone, Southern Company, the parent company, made over $1.2 billion in profit, just profit in the last 3 months.
The last 3 months.
Meanwhile, yeah,
that's
just the last 3 months alone. Last year, it was like $4.7 billion for the total, net income, the net profit for Southern for 2019. And to put this in perspective for folks, right? Like when I talk about debt or cutting off people in the midst of a pandemic, Alabama is a black hole because our Public Service Commission doesn't actually hold the utilities accountable for their actions. But in Georgia, we have some data about how many people are behind and can't pay their bills, they're out of work, things like that. And we know that right now about $100 million, maybe a little bit more than that, of total bad debt is out there for customers in Georgia Power, which is a larger utility than Alabama. So I say all this to say that's a rounding error. If you think about their net profit being, $4.7 billion last year or $1.25 billion this last 3 quarters, they could forgive all of that debt, and it would barely even show on their reports, to Wall Street, to the investors.
That is so hard for me to wrap my head around, the fact that their profits, even that they could forgive all of the debt from poor and working people in Alabama, and it would be a rounding error on their profits from the last 3 months, not to mention the last year, but the last 3 months.
That's right. And then we also...
No, go ahead.
We also talk about, not only is the company itself obviously profiting off of poverty, which is just, again, a crazy assertion, but, some of the executives there are making out like bandits as well. I mean, last year, Tom Fanning, the CEO of Southern Company, he walked away with a record compensation of $28 million himself alone. So, I mean, he could take himself like a 50% pay cut, still make tens of millions of dollars, right? And we'd have thousands of people that could have their lights restored across the few states here in the Southeast.
That's insane. So what was his compensation again?
Last year was about $28 million.
It was $28 million.
Wow.
This is a government protected private monopoly. I mean, like, this may as well be tax money because they are a government protected monopoly, and the top person here at this company is making tens of millions of dollars off of our utility bills. And can you talk more about how Alabama fares as far as how much we pay in utilities and how much profit Alabama Power makes versus comparable states? Because that's something that really stuck out to me. The fact that we pay more and Alabama Power has a higher rate of profit than Georgia Power or than similar utilities in Mississippi.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, right? So the way it works is, like you said, we have these effectively government-backed monopolies. So the state of Alabama effectively gives Alabama Power, in this case, or Georgia Power, and across the country it's like this. This is not, just Alabama that does it this way. Because we didn't want, 100 years ago, we didn't want 15 electric grids running through people's neighborhoods. And we said, okay, well, it makes sense just to have, one set of infrastructure, one set of wires here, right? And we're going to make sure we regulate that one company because, as you know, and as listeners know, it's an American right to not like monopolies because of the abuses that we've seen throughout American history of what monopolies do to regular consumers. And so the idea was, we're going to grant you a monopoly, but in exchange for stringent regulation to act as the placeholder for a market. You don't like a particular service in the market, you can just leave them. But you can't leave. If you're a resident of Birmingham and you want electricity, you pay this one company. That's it. Mm-hmm. You don't have another choice. You have to buy from them. And you look to your elected representative at the Public Service Commission to hold those companies accountable and make sure that they're actually doing what's in the public's interest. And so your second question, they're clearly not doing that because Alabama Power is one of the most profitable utilities in the country. So in the utility industry and in others, but we talk a lot about something called return on equity, and that is more or less kind of a proxy for profitability. The higher the number, the more return on their assets they're allowed. In other words, profit on their assets and investments they're allowed to make. Alabama Power has, probably the highest of any investor-owned utility that I've ever seen. There may be, some random IOU out there that I haven't seen, but they are allowed to earn, between 13 and 14%, profit margin, just guaranteed. There is no risk to them. You can't go anywhere. And that's much higher than many other industries and much, much higher than even other utilities. So I, wrote an article for the Energy and Policy Institute, I don't know, maybe a few months ago, kind of analyzing this question a little bit more, right? Of, okay, well, not only is their profit margin and their rate high, but how much does that really hurt Alabamians, right? How much have we all paid on our utility bills for this largesse to Wall Street? And the number is pretty staggering. So between 2014 and 2018, I think it was 2014, so about a 5-year period, 2014 through 2019, the number was $1 billion in excess profit. So in other words, not just profit, but profit above kind of the national median for return on equity for other utilities. So if we look across the country and say, well, what's kind of the average profitability being awarded to those utilities? Alabama Power was well above that, and it was costing the average, account for Alabama Power about $700 over the course of a 5-year period. So, I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of money for regular folks.
Definitely. And you mentioned that, why is this a government-protected monopoly? Why do we want a monopoly here where, generally speaking, like you said, Americans are rightfully so skeptical about monopolies? And the reason is that it doesn't make sense to have, 3 or 4 or 5 or 11 different electrical grids. Like, it's just much more efficient to have one electrical grid. And so then to either the choices then are between a private monopoly and a public monopoly. Here in North Alabama, we have a public monopoly. We get our power through the TVA, which as you, I believe it was either in your tweet or in an article that I was reading about this, they mentioned that here in North Alabama, our utility rates are significantly lower than in the southern half of the state because they get their power from Alabama Power and we get our power from the TVA. And the TVA is a government monopoly. The TVA is a federal agency, and Alabama Power is a private agency. It's a private company that is regulated by the government. Now, that's not necessarily to say that that can't work, but for it to work, we have to have regulators that are willing to do the job of regulation. We have to have government watchdogs keeping these private corporations, like keeping them on a leash, so to speak, so that they don't run wild with profits and stealing from us, basically stealing $1 billion in 4 years from working Alabamians. Can you talk a bit tell us what and so the Public Service Commission is the entity that is supposed to do that with Alabama Power. Tell us a bit about the job description of the Public Service Commission, what they're like technically supposed to do, and their record over the last few, over the last several years.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it. I mean, they're supposed to be the arbiter between, the regular folks of the state and the utility company to determine what is fair, what is just and fair between the two, right? Because, you can go to the extreme in either direction and the system collapses in the sense that if you do what we're currently doing, we're going to one extreme and saying that, the shareholder is king, charge as much as you possibly can, disconnections, regular folks' ability to pay, economic development, effectively doesn't matter. We're gonna enrich the shareholder, right? And then that catches Alabama, keeps us in this persistent cycle of poverty, or at least doesn't help us get out of it because of how much money people, are paying on a utility bill. But the inverse is true as well, right? In the sense that there has to be at least a healthy enough utility financially if you're going to have a private utility like this, as opposed to public, as you mentioned. It has to be healthy enough to exist. We don't want the utility company to go away. We need electricity, so we need them to be able to operate. And that Public Service Commission, right, is supposed to be the arbiter to say, what do we need to do to make sure the utility company can operate it and safely and reasonably and do what it's supposed to do so that when I turn my lights on, the lights actually come on, but also not in a way that sacrifices the well-being. And when I turn that light on, I'm automatically in a worse position than I would be had I not turned it on.
Right.
So it's my understanding that we've got, I hadn't followed this a whole lot. Jacob kind of brought it up to me, but I followed, Laura Casey, I believe, is running for the Public Service Commission, and seen her post a lot over the past couple of years. And the Public Service Commission kind of hides behind closed doors, really, whenever they meet. And I've noticed the past 6 months, 9 months or so, she actually tried to record, bring in video, maybe her phone or something other like that, and just broadcast it to where the public can see what's going on here, which makes perfectly good sense. If they're representing the people of Alabama, you should be able to have some type of record of it, and they absolutely refused, shut her down.
They arrested her, right?
Yeah, and so it really speaks to what the Public Service Commission is, what they're doing right now. Apparently they're afraid to let the public know, but there's no accountability there.
Yeah, the only accountability you have in Alabama, right, is through the ballot box. And you're exactly right. I was actually there at that meeting. They removed her and another woman from the meeting because they were live streaming, and she fought that all the way to the Alabama Supreme Court and lost. Right? I mean, it goes also to show how weak and
corrupt,
frankly,
corrupt
worthless
is the
are
word.
open meetings. Yeah, well, that too, but also just we have Open Meetings Act and open records law here in the state that is practically worthless. If what's the point of having even an Open Meetings Act if you can't even have an open meeting?
Yeah.
So those things need to be reformed as well. But to your point about accountability, in a case where you have an elected public service commission, your only real accountability is at the ballot box. But it's not just, I want people to understand that it's not just with the Public Service Commission, because the Public Service Commission was created by the legislature. So ultimately, it is responsible to the Alabama legislature. And if the Alabama legislature decides that the Public Service Commission, as it's currently structured, is not doing its job, is not holding the interest of the people at heart and wants to make changes, it can do so. It has the ability to make wholesale changes to the Public Service Commission, or to even pass laws that override or change decisions of the Public Service Commission. So it is not like if something is done at the PSC, it's the end all be all. We all vote for people at the State House and the State Senate who ultimately can also hold these folks accountable as well.
Right.
Yeah, and the unfortunate part about that, it sounds like, is if Laura actually does win this the race, that and she begins making public a lot of the things that's going on, it sounds like the legislature has the authority to come in and shut her down as well, which is the terrible part about this. You can get good people in there, it sounds like, and still these corporate bootlickers down in Montgomery can still come in and shut them down.
So well, that's right. I mean, if you look at the way the current system is structured, it is structured to benefit the monopoly, right. and that in this case is Alabama Power, or if you're a gas customer, it's Spire Alabama, right? So it is created, it is done, and it has kind of morphed itself over the course of many decades, so that attempts at reform are going to be long, hard slogs get done. They're not going to happen overnight because there are all these levers of influence and power that these monopoly entities have. And a big one that we haven't even talked about is campaign contributions, right? So not only are they taking all this excess profit from us, but what do they do with those excess profits? Well, they buy politicians.
Right. Yeah. So we can talk about the race a little bit. Twinkle Kavanaugh is the Republican that is running. Her campaign is entirely funded by Alabama Power, right?
No, in Alabama, it's actually illegal, as in most states, for utility companies to give directly to the regulators. So, Alabama Power is legally prohibited from donating directly to anyone running for that race. But we have documented, or I have documented in other states, and delving into Alabama data right now. But there are many ways around that, right? You can give to PACs that then turn around and give, and there are a lot of affiliated interests that do so. And in this particular race, there's a lot of coal money that's flying into it as well.
So, like I said, she's the Twinkle is the Republican that's running. She's been there since 2010, I believe. What is she saying about this? The fact that Alabama Power has one of the highest profits of any utility company in the nation, that they have taken $1 billion in excess profits from Alabamians, that they're about to disconnect thousands of working and poor Alabamians from power during the middle of a pandemic, during the middle of winter. That Laura Casey was arrested at a Public Service Commission meeting for trying to enlighten the public on what is going on at our service commission. What is she saying about all this?
She seems pretty happy with her record, from what I can tell. She often will talk about the fact that Alabama has lower than the national average on our electric rates. And so there's this dichotomy, right, that people are using language to hide the truth. And this is an example of that, right? Alabama is just slightly under the national average when it comes to how much we pay per kilowatt hour. But we use a ton of energy. Number one, it's obvious because it's our climate, but Alabama's climate is not that much different than Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, or for that matter, it's even hotter in Florida, right? So it's not like we're an outlier in terms of the climate because we're Hawaii. We're not. But we have extremely high utility bills. So I always argue to folks that, the rate, while it's important, is not what really matters. What matters is the number that comes on people's bills at the end of the day. What do they have to pay? And that is driven by the rate times the consumption. Our consumption is so high because of climate, but also because we've made terrible policy decisions that encourages the utility company to sell more and more and more, whereas other states have invested in a lot of conservation and energy efficiency, distributed generation like solar at the residential and small commercial level for local small businesses to help reduce how much we have to buy, right? And drive bills down, because those save money both for the people who do them, but also for all ratepayers. Because if we don't need to build new gas plants like Alabama Power just did, that would have saved customers $1.5 billion. But no, we had to build a new power plant because we didn't invest in efficiency. So she seems pretty happy with that record. She thinks that they're being open and transparent, that they have low rates, and that it's just because it's hot here that bills are high.
And one of the things that I've read in the past year that really just irks me is the fact that if you as a homeowner want to begin trying to break free of this monopoly and install solar panels on your house or at your business, that they put a tax, that Alabama Power actually puts a tax on your electric bill to try to discourage you from doing that. And that's insanity.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if you think about the at least stated ethos of this state, right, of being the fan of markets, being the fan of low taxation, being the fan of property rights, all of that was thrown completely out the window to do favors for Alabama Power here. And so Alabama Power has, at least the highest I've been able to find, tax on solar in the country. Advocates in the state and clean energy advocates in the state, including Energy Alabama, that I work for, attempted to challenge that and get it changed. And of course, Alabama Power came back and said, we should raise the tax, and the Public Service Commission agreed. So, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, regular folks who are trying to take these decisions into their own hands for their small business or their home and their family, they're rewarded, with extra taxes that don't exist in other states. I mean, let's be honest here. Georgia Power, the sister company of Alabama Power, tried the same shenanigans with the Georgia Public Service Commission, who is also all Republican, by the way, and they didn't even do it. Like the Georgia Commission effectively told them to get out of here with that.
Yeah, Daniel,
that's not going to fly next door.
We're coming up on a hard break for the top of the hour news, but we're going to bring you on for just a couple more minutes after that. Are you okay to stay on? All right. We'll talk more to Daniel after the break. Stay tuned. This is the Valley Labor Report.
Huntsville's #1 news, talk, and weather station. WVNN Athens. WVNN FM Trinity. A Cumulus station. It's 10 o'clock.
From ABC News, I'm Brian Clark. The end of the presidential campaign is converging with a skyrocketing number of coronavirus cases. More on that from ABC's Alex Perez.
The U.S. topping yet another grim milestone, 9 million cases and a record 92,000 cases in just the last 24 hours. Hospitals in Wisconsin running out of room. After shattering another record in Illinois, Chicago shutting down indoor dining, urging people to get flu shots.
President Trump on Friday said he does not think his outdoor campaign rallies are dangerous, but Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer told ABC News.
This White House has never been serious about having a national strategy. Almost 30,000 people have died, tens of millions unemployed, people in food lines who never imagined they would be, and they still don't have a national strategy.
Today, the president holds 4 campaign rallies in Pennsylvania. Former Vice President Joe Biden campaigns alongside former President Obama in Michigan. The Midwest tipped the election in Donald Trump's favor 4 years ago. But ABC's Deirdre Bolton says this year there's a new element at play nationwide.
For the first time ever, people between the ages of 18 and 35 will make up 1/3 of eligible voters, greatly influencing who's going to sit in the Oval Office for the next 4 years.
Early turnout is reaching record levels. Over 89.5 million people have already voted. Legendary actor Sean Connery has died at the age of 90, according to the BBC. ABC's Julia McFarlane has more from London.
Connery from Edinburgh, Scotland. He was cast as the original Bond back in 1962. And in 1988, he won an Oscar for playing a tough Irish cop in The Untouchables. And in 2000, Connery was knighted by the Queen, cementing his status as a national British icon.
Connery's son tells the BBC his father had been unwell for some time and died in his sleep. You're listening to ABC News.
Balance of Nature's fruits and vegetables in a capsule, changing the world one life at a time.
I started taking Balanced Nature about 16 months ago to 20 months ago, something like that. And my blood work is right down the middle. I mean, you know, you look at what the high should be, what the low should be, and everything's right down the middle. And my doctor's just amazed by it. She goes, "This is just fantastic." And I tell all the doctors, "Hey, I'm taking Balanced Nature." And I say it's just a naturally occurring thing. It's just 10 servings of fruits and vegetables that I take every day, and I take them into capsules. I said there's no supplements or anything else that go in it, and it works, you know. What can I say?
Get a wide variety of all your daily recommended servings of whole fruits and vegetables without having to leave your home. Right now, Balance of Nature is offering free shipping and 35% off on any new preferred order. Call 1-800-2468-751 or go to balanceofnature.com and use discount code FRUITS.
News Talk 770 AM, 92.5 FM, WVNN.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. Today is the Alabama AFL-CIO Open Line Saturday. No ads, courtesy of the Alabama AFL-CIO, besides the hard breaks at the bottom and the top of the hour. So we're going long today, and if you want to give us a call, 1-866-494-9866 is the number. On the line right now, though, we've got Daniel Tate. He is the Chief Operating Officer for Energy Alabama. He founded that organization in 2014 to help speed Alabama's transition to sustainable energy. And I'll let you pick up where you left off on the other side of the break, Daniel.
Yeah, we were just talking about the tax, right, on solar, and being that it just is completely antithetical to everything that Alabama claims it stands for when it talks about low taxation and, you know, free markets and customer choice and property rights and things like that. So, you know, I was just mentioning that the Georgia Power had tried to do the same thing, which is, of course, you know, Alabama Power's sister company next door, and you know that commission basically kind of laughed them out the door and said, you know, you're not gonna try that here. But our commission seemed to be quite happy to comply.
Right. And no, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, so it's interesting, you know, you said that they can't donate directly to, that Alabama Power, a corporation that's been can't donate to the regulators of that entity. But, of course, with Citizens United and all the dark money that flows through PACs, we know that that's easily gotten around. But they can donate to legislators, I assume, governors, secretaries of state and things like that. Have you done any research at all? I know I'm kind of hitting you blind on this, but to see how much, if any at all, Alabama's Power is donating to legislator campaigns or governor campaigns or anything like that?
Or PACs.
Or that's true, or PACs. I don't know that they have to report PACs, but.
Yeah. Well, I would tell you that I don't have a specific number completely off the top of my head right now, but, you know, yes, they can donate to basically everybody else, or anybody else, and issues and things like that.
So they could donate to the legislators that create the regulation, the Public Service Commission.
That's correct. Yes, and they do, right. So they are one of while I couldn't give you an exact number off the top of my head, they are one of, if not the largest donors in the state of Alabama. And I think anybody who walks the house, the halls of the State House would tell you that, Alabama Power is probably the most influential and powerful entity in the state.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. Daniel, thank you so much for calling in. I feel like this has been a very informative discussion. And folks, like we mentioned, there is a race on the ballot for the Public Service Commission. The president of the Public Service Commission, the incumbent is Twinkle Kavanaugh. The challenger is Laura Casey. Laura Casey's the Democrat, but folks, the Public Service Commission doesn't have anything to say about abortion, doesn't have anything to say about immigration, any of these, none of those social issue type stuff. The only thing that the Public Service Commission has control of is regulating the utilities. So just think about that when you go to the ballot box. Don't think about whether there's an R or a D next to their name. Think about who is going to be better for working Alabamians.
Yeah, well, think about who has been detrimental for working Alabamians the last 10 years.
One of them's got a record.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel, thanks so much for calling in. Where can people find you and follow up more on some of this information?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. EnergyAlabama.org is our website, and that's where you can find work that we're doing here in the state of Alabama. And, of course, that's the same handle across all social channels, Facebook and Twitter. And if you'd like to see my personal rantings on Twitter, it's at Tate, TAITDL, often talking about utilities and monopoly issues there as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's been very informative, and I think it's something that most of these citizens of Alabama have no clue what the PSC is, and they need to be a little bit more educated on it.
Yeah. All right, Daniel,
sure.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
calling
gentlemen.
So much.
All right. So, again, folks, that was Daniel Tate. He is the Chief Operating Officer for Energy Alabama. You can find him and Energy Alabama stuff on Facebook, Twitter, etc., etc. They do lots of really good work. Around these sorts of issues, making sure that Alabamians are that they know what's going on. So make sure that you're following them. They're doing some really good work. So on the line now, and folks, remember, this is the Alabama AFL-CIO Open Line Saturday. If you want to give us a call, 1-866-494-9866 is the number. We've got another caller on the line. It's Lee Baines III of Lee Baines and the Glory Fires. They are a band out of Birmingham, Alabama. They are fantastic. They are a fantastic band, and they're on their Twitter bio. They describe themselves as Deep South, wide open, far left, liberation gospel.
Dude, I absolutely love that. I mean, that is one of the greatest descriptions in the history of mankind.
I love it. I love it. So, Lee, thank you so much for calling in. I feel like we got a big star. I've been seeing, I feel like I got a big star on the radio today. I've been seeing some of your interviews across the pond. You did an interview with a podcast in the UK here a while back. I've seen you on some radio in Seattle, just all over the place. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. You've got a new EP
oh, man,
out.
It's good to be in Athens, Alabama.
Yes,
at least telephonically.
Absolutely. So you've got a new EP out, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it came out yesterday.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, we had cut a version of I don't know if y'all are familiar with this band, the Tom Robinson Band, who was like a leftist kind of new wave punk band in the UK in the late 70s. And we cut a version of their song 2468 Motorway, which was like a big hit in the UK, but I guess it didn't really get as big over here. But we cut a version of that song, and as well as I did 3 versions of my songs on an acoustic guitar by myself, which usually our stuff's pretty ramped up, and loud electric guitars. So did those kind of quieter versions, and just thinking about I love the perspective y'all bring to talking about elections, like the segment you just had, because you bring it into a broader political and economic context, which is like, how do these elected officials respond to the needs and the will of the people? You know what I mean? But a lot of times I feel like when we talk about elections, particularly in the media, it's like people talk about it as if that's the only thing that matters. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And as if like change happens from presidents or from people in Congress or whatever, when history shows that it's the other way around. It's like change comes from the people, from collective action. And Tom Robinson was and is like a really great example of practicing that. And just that whole image of like, the motorway over there is what they call the interstate. Basically, it's the same kind of thing. And that idea of like, it's like nationalized infrastructure. It's something that we all own, that we all work together to build. And it's just that sort of like idea of freedom, you know what I mean? Right. Like being able to get out there and keep it moving, keep it rolling. And that's, I think that's an important thing to consider in these times, that freedom is constantly pushing forward, and regardless of who wins on Tuesday.
Definitely. And you mentioned that about connecting elections, or when we touch on elections, we connect it to these we try to connect it to these broader social and political trends, and we don't push elections generally. We talk about the results of elections, we talk about the results that has on working people, but we come from a labor perspective. We are both unionists, and we believe that the labor movement is one of, if not the best vehicle for change in the lives of ordinary working people, and we don't put our hopes in politicians. We don't define ourselves or our membership or other people's membership in our organizations by who we're voting for on Tuesday. Right. David has lots of members that are going to be voting for the GOP on Tuesday. Right. We'll have conversations about that. We can disagree about that, but there's a broader and deeper connection that we have to our members. And speaking of connecting things to broader societal and political trends, that's what you try to do in a lot of your music. One of the interviews that I've listened to you that you gave over and over was on KEXP in Seattle.
Great station, by the way.
Great station, great interview.
Man, love that station.
Y'all ought to go and listen to Lee Baines and the Glory Fires on KEXP. You can find it on YouTube. They played a set, and they did a little bit of that. They talked to the host a little bit. One of the things that they talked about is the way that you kind of play with your Southern identity. You've got a song called "We Dare Defend Our Rights," which is the Alabama state motto. But you don't use it in the same way that some of these bootlicking politicians are going to use it.
That's right, man. Yeah, I wrote that song after House Bill 56 was passed, if you remember, where it was basically like the Alabama legislature not even giving the police free rein, but basically mandating the police to try to pull over anybody and demand papers that they suspected of being immigrants, And I was just thinking about that and thinking about our motto, which is "We dare defend our rights." And man, that seemed like such a violation of that. You know what I mean? Where when we, as the people of Alabama, have the right to go about our lives, you know what I mean? To drive down the road, to go to work, to go to school, to go to church, to do whatever, and without having somebody pull us over for no damn reason, you know. And I just started, and as I started thinking about that, I started thinking about all these different ways that, you know, the power structure in Alabama and the big companies and all that have used that motto to justify violating our rights, you know, all the way back to segregation, all the way back to, still to the present day with union busting, you know, and it's like power has always come from we, the people of Alabama, saying, nah, we're going to defend our rights here. You know what I mean? And that's either on the Edmund Pettus Bridge or, you know, in the textile mills in 1934 or whatever it is. You know what I mean? It's like the people of Alabama putting their common interests first and fighting, you know, the big mules and the fat cats in Montgomery and all that stuff. That's where that motto really shines to me, you know.
Yeah. And one of the things that's interesting to me, or I guess it's not interesting, it's really shameful, is the fact that we, you know, I look at growing up in Alabama, watching the Dukes of Hazzard, you know, run from Big Boss Hogg, and you know, all of our heroes were anti-authoritarian types and completely anti-government types, and they've done, and when I say they, I mean the Republicans in general, has done such a wonderful job of dividing us on these wedge issues, the social issues that really don't affect any of us for the most part. And
that's right.
And I've seen so many of my good friends turn around and just these back the blue and this insanity of he had it coming. If somebody's executed in the middle of the street, he had it coming. He should have listened to the orders. And I'm just thinking, what has my generation come to here? You know, it's they've done a wonderful job of dividing us.
Yes, man, and you're so right about that, because, you know, it's like, exactly like Dukes of Hazzard or growing up, you know, like Waylon Jennings, you know, they're the outlaws, you know what I mean? There's such a long, heroic tradition of standing up to authority and in the South, and that's something, I mean, you know, even my family members that I grew up around that waved the rebel flag, you know, that's what they said it was about. Was about standing up to authority, you know, and standing up to people who tried to tell you how to live. And yet to hear people say that out of one side of their mouth and then out of the other side say, yeah, that guy who was unarmed and shot by the police deserved it. It's mind-boggling, and it's really sad, you know what I mean? Because like you said, there's a lot to be proud of in our, you know, kind of regional history of standing up to power, whether that was Martin Luther King or whether that's, you know, the first guys driving cars really fast through the mountains to keep moonshine away from the from the revenue man. You know what I mean? That's all pretty cool stuff, you know.
I'd like if you could kind of tell us, like, what is it that kind of drives your the things that you write music about and the things that you're passionate about? Because you obviously you come at these things from a collective solidarity perspective. Some would call it a left-wing perspective. I think you would probably call it a left-wing perspective. But you are. I mean, folks are listening to you. Like, you're born and raised in Alabama, in the boonies, so to speak. You know, and something that you did recently that really stuck out to me was you released 8 hours of gospel hymns. And I have never I don't think I have ever met anybody that shares kind of a political worldview with me that also has a really deep appreciation for those old shape note hymns. I mean, in one of those sessions, you got to you broke a string, and you were like, I got to stomping on that one. I should have known that I was going to break a string, and and I have gotten so much out of that, and so I don't know if is it kind of a faith driven? I don't know how your faith plays into that, or if faith plays a really large role in your life, but I'd be interested in kind of hearing about what are kind of the driving things for you.
Man, that's a great question, and I'm glad that you got something out of those gospel hours, because I definitely did. And I guess it's like early in quarantine when I was just kind of twiddling my thumbs, and kind of freaking out like a lot of people, I guess, because we'd had a tour, and I was supposed to be on this tour for 2.5 weeks, and then COVID hit, or it got, all the shutdowns started happening just a couple days into it. So I was back at home, and I didn't have any work lined up, and I was like, what the hell am I doing, and I just went out in the backyard one day and was just singing gospel songs, which is something that I just do for myself, to kind of, just realign my spirit, I guess. And I was out there, and we had a neighbor a couple doors down where I was like partway through singing a song, and I just kind of saw him in my peripheral vision, and he was like leaning up against the fence drinking a beer, and he was like, man, don't mind me, keep going, and
that's great.
That's when I was kind of like, well, maybe I should think about doing this, somewhat publicly. And I grew up, my grandparents were church musicians in the Methodist church. My grandma was a choir director, and I grew up singing with my granddaddy in church. And, it's interesting when you were talking about, well, a lot of which I've been talking about on this episode, like with the TVA, for instance, that just always reminds me of them, because, they were, one of the things I've been doing during COVID is like the genealogy stuff, and I think my granddaddy was he was like a 5th generation Alabamian, and he was, they were both deeply religious, and man, they thought that the TVA and the CCC and the WTA was just the best stuff ever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they talked about it all the time, and they were, because they both, were in my granddaddy told me about standing in the bread lines, in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, even though they were, I guess, what you might call like culturally conservative, you know what I mean, mm-hmm. or traditional minded, they always related taking care of ourselves and each other with the Bible. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, that's how they lived their lives, and that's kind of how I saw them live, was they took care of the people around them that were struggling, And by the time I grew up, their neighborhood was pretty much all black. They were pretty much only white folks still living there. And I just saw the way that they lived their beliefs, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I that was kind of how I got into music, was through them and through church. And then later I got into punk rock, after having bad experiences in my church and all that kind of stuff. But over the years, there was like certain kind of preachers and writers who drew me back to this idea of like how to bring our faith into alignment with our principles. You know what I mean? And of course, we all know about Martin Luther King, and reading his writings did a lot for me in that regard. And then also there's a white Baptist pastor in South Georgia called Clarence Jordan, whose writings. He and some fellow church members started an illegally interracial farm in South Georgia in the 40s, so long before integration. And he said it was because they were trying to live like Jesus did, you know. And then that took me into like learning about liberation theology in Latin America, and reading about you know, different folks who are trying to bring, you know, it's like it says in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You know what I mean? So I've just started trying to learn about people who are trying to bring those ideals of justice and equality and grace and mercy, and, you know, comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable to earth, and not just waiting till we die.
Right.
Cut my mic off for a minute while I was answering that phone. It's really amazing to listen to you talk about that, because I kind of had the same issues, you know, being raised. I mean, most of us in the South are raised in church, you know, that's a given. But being raised in the Southern Baptist Church, it was, you know, early on, and this is back in the 70s, my great grandmother started the same church today in a barn, you know, but it was all about community and mutual aid and solidarity and all of these things that most of us on the left believe in. And when I say the left, I don't mean the neoliberals of today. I'm talking about the true far left. And as I got into my 20s, I kind of grew away from the church, and it was turning into something that I didn't like anymore, you know. But then as I got into my 30s and late 30s, I started seeing, hey, there is a whole nother thing over here on the far left that aligns with my social and economic values, and also my religious values. And you know, and I think that's something that the church in the South especially has lost, is that sense of community. And that's, I mean, they all meet on Sunday, I get that, but really after Sunday they aren't taking care of each other anymore. They're not looking out for their neighbors anymore. They could care less. You know, most of them don't even know what their neighbors' names are. You know, and we've just lost that whole sense of community and I think it's an absolute shame. And it's all politically driven. There is no doubt in my mind, all of this is politically driven for the purpose of separating us and making us fight amongst each other. So it's beautiful to hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, no, you're absolutely right, man. And it's funny, I was just reading this morning that scripture from Matthew where Jesus says, you know, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. You know, and it's like, but what we see in the church is, and on TV, you know, with the televangelists and all that stuff, is the opposite. Is people saying that, well, what God's will is for you to get as rich as possible and for you to do whatever you need to do to get there. And that if somebody's rich, then that's evidence that they're godly. You know what I mean?
Right.
And at that point, you're just going up against the words Jesus spoke. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, that's not even a difference of interpretation. That's just that's just undermining the whole system. You know what I mean? And,
Lee, we've got about 30 seconds here. If you could stay on just for like 1 or 2 minutes on the other side, that way you can give your plugs and let folks know where we can find you. Does that be all right?
Man. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to have the bottom of the hour news and be right back with more with Lee Baines on the Valley Labor Report.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison. This is News Talk 770 AM, 92.5 FM, WVNN. News starts now.
The U.S. now hitting the highest number of new COVID-19 cases in a single day, more than 97,000. ABC's Trevor Ault.
COVID infection counts have been steadily rising since we got into the fall, to the point more than half of the U.S. shattered records this month, and experts fear more deaths are going to follow, as already this virus is claiming the lives of more than 800 Americans every day.
Just 3 days before Election Day, the presidential candidates hitting the battleground states hard. President Trump will be holding several events in Pennsylvania, while former President Barack Obama will be joining his former Vice President Joe Biden for events in Michigan. The final push coming as early voting smashes records across the country. More than 85.7 million Americans have already cast their ballots. And for the first time ever, voters between the ages of 18 and 35 will make up 1/3 of eligible voters. The original James Bond has died. Sean Connery passed away peacefully in his sleep at his home in the Bahamas. His son tells the BBC he was 90. Dave Packer, ABC News.
WVNN. Let's go! Hey, walking through a wasteland, looking skies.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. It is the Alabama AFL-CIO Open Line Saturday, the last Saturday of every month. We just want to talk to callers. 1-866-494-9866 is the number. We've still got Lee Baines on the line. He is a rock artist from Birmingham, Alabama. He's a real big shot, internationally famous. We are we're so proud to have him on the show. I kept you longer than I told you I would. I hope I hadn't I hadn't eaten too much of your time. I've just really enjoyed the conversation, and like I said, I got so much out of those gospel hours. I would really recommend folks look that up on Facebook and YouTube. You can find the Gospel Hours on Don Giovanni Records YouTube page. I got so much out of that. I love old shape note gospel hymns. You know, I'm talking just the real simple, 1 or 2 chord type stuff. And that's, you did 8 hours of it. So man, I was in heaven when I found it. I loved it. So I appreciate you doing that. So Lee, tell folks where they can find you, where they can buy your new EP that just came out yesterday.
Yeah, go out and buy it, because that is an excellent EP. I listened to it last night, and I wasn't expecting the acoustic versions of everything, but man, I was floored by that.
Yeah. So where can folks buy the EP and everything else that you've put out?
Well, we're on pretty much wherever you would go to find stuff online. We're on Bandcamp and Spotify, and probably local. Like I know Vertical House in Huntsville carries our stuff, and yeah, we're a Google away.
All right, Lee, thank you so much.
Thank y'all for having me, man. I love your show and love what y'all are doing, and really appreciate what you're doing for the people of Alabama, and thanks for having me on.
All right, brother. Thanks so much. So, folks, make sure you go and look up Lee Baines III and the Glory Fires. You can find them on Spotify, Bandcamp, Twitter. It is some really good stuff. I've been listening to them almost nonstop the last few weeks, the last couple months since I found them. So make sure you go and look that up.
And like you said, you can check them out on YouTube. That I seen that gospel video that he done. It's absolutely amazing. If you like old gospel hymns, if you were raised in the church like us, it will set you on fire.
Man, I love it. Yeah. I told you he got to stomping on one of them and broke a string on his guitar. so you gotta go and check that out.
We got about 30 minutes.
Yeah,
folks.
Folks. If you want to call in, 1-866-494-9866 is the number. I guess the fella who called in earlier didn't want to come on the air.
Well, he was a steward in the post office. And,
okay.
And he said he listened to us pretty regular. He didn't agree with everything we said, but he thought we were doing a pretty decent job. But he had a previous appointment. I hated that we couldn't get to him because I didn't want to
Yeah,
interrupt Lee, but
no, that's. Did he say what he wanted to talk about, or was he just?
He was just talking about being a steward in the post office
Gotcha.
and how some of the things, wasn't being treated fairly and things like that. So
yeah,
he was retiring and he was sick of it, and I feel him. I feel him because this is the problem with being actively involved in the union. It is a frustrating process having to can you imagine having to deal with hundreds of people, the different makeups of attitudes and different political alignments and different work ethic. I mean, it's just a constant challenge whenever you're a union leader. So I feel for you, brother.
Yeah, well, and we appreciate you listening, and if you do, if you get out of your appointment before 11, feel free to call back. 1-866-494-9866 is the number. But he said that you said something that he said that's important and that we've touched on today when we were talking to Lee, and I know we've touched on before. But he doesn't agree with everything that we say, and we're not going to agree with everything that he thinks.
Who does?
Yeah, you're never going. I don't agree with David on everything.
No. Far from it.
I disagree with him on quite a few things, but there is a deeper connection that we have, that working people ought to have with one another, with their fellow workers, with their sisters and brothers.
You can still disagree and love somebody. And we've gotten so far away from that. I disagree with my parents constantly, more as a younger child than as I am now. Well, I mean, you could, and that's
you
the
mean
thing.
Your parents were right about some things that you thought?
What is that old saying? The older I got, the more I realized how smart my dad was and how dumb I was. I mean, ain't that the truth? But we've gotten so far away from the fact that, he's a Republican, he's a Democrat, or she's a Democrat and she's a Republican, and I hate her. They're snowflakes, they're this, and it's like, man, where have we come to in this nation?
Yeah, there's so much more that unites us than divides us. I believe. I truly believe that there's more that unites us than divides us, and the way that politicians try, the way that they are one of the ways that they try to bring people out to vote is they emphasize the divisions instead of trying to bring people together on a common agenda that can benefit all working people. And that's why I think the labor movement is so beautiful, that we're able to kind of transcend a lot of these differences that people have. And it doesn't matter so much what your opinion on this or that issue is. If you're in my union, if you're in the labor movement, if you're a working person, I'm going to fight for you. And I know that if you're in the labor movement, you're going to fight for me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's
we've got the same self-interest. At the end of the day, we want to be able to retire with dignity. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to go to the doctor and be able to afford and know that if we have an emergency, it's not going to bankrupt us. All these things that it's a common alignment.
Right.
And what we were talking about earlier as far as solidarity, mutual aid, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So how often do you hear that on the right?
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-mm.
How often do you hear the hand being extended?
Right. So speaking of people trying to divide folks up, I wanted to talk about that Tuberville ad.
Which one? I mean, good Lord, man! I've been getting mail
the one that was in the Courier. The one that was in the Courier.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the one that Brother Jeb shared with us. Man, that. Woo.
And
That's
it looks like it's gotten around.
insanity.
The president of the Nashville CLC sent me that picture. Like she sent me, Jim Williams down in Anniston shared it, and he must have got that from somebody who got it from Jeb. But I was surprised when the Nashville Labor Council president messaged me last night.
I put it on Facebook, and yesterday when I got up, it had 63 shares yesterday.
Yeah.
So
it's gotten around. But the ad was taken out in a bunch of local newspapers that said, "Who will stand up to big labor?
Big labor.
Who's going to stand up to working people? Who's going to be the person that fights against workers if you put them in the Senate? Who's going to be the person that fights against higher wages and better working conditions?" Tuberville wants you to know that the person who's going to fight against big labor, who's going to fight against working people is him. He wants you to know that he hates labor. That's what this ad said. This ad
in the Shoals of all places.
In the Shoals. Can you believe that?
Let me tell you.
Oh, man.
If you're not familiar with the Shoals area and the deep history of labor in the Shoals, IBEW has been over there over 100 years. I'm talking about 100 years. There are 22 independent labor unions in the Shoals. This is what you call not knowing your target area.
Yeah.
I mean, who in their right mind? But honestly, I don't think that was put in by Tuberville, but I'm sure he approved the ad. You know, Chris Brooks, who was on the show, one of our earlier shows, thought that it may have been put in by the National Right to Work organization. And that's the problem with all this dark money is you don't know who's putting them in. There's money coming from everywhere in this race to do everything they can to smear Doug Jones.
Yeah, well, listen at this. He just lies. They just
flat out lie.
They just lie in the article. They say, or in the ad, they say union chieftains funnel this hard-earned money, talking about dues dollars, into campaigns, talking about dues dollars and agency fees from non-union members that are paid to unions for the cost of representation. Union chieftains funnel this hard-earned money into campaigns of tax and spend politicians. No, they don't.
Yeah.
No, they don't. That is illegal. You can't do that. You would be thrown under the jail for doing that.
Yeah.
David is he was Secretary Treasurer for the State Council of Machinists. I'm Secretary Treasurer for the Labor Council here in this area. We are like literally stewards of dues dollars from union members. We do not spend dues money on elections, on campaign. It doesn't happen. That's a lie. He's lying.
But it sounds good, Jacob. It sounds good, and this is the reason. This is the division there. They love to throw that division in there to make people think, and that is the reason why you have so many people on the right attacking unions, because they think these union dollars are going to campaigns that are predominantly Democrat. Yes, union members predominantly support Democratic candidates. It's because Democratic candidates predominantly support unions. They predominantly put in place good legislation that helps workers, as opposed to what we've been seeing in the last 4 years.
Right.
We talked about it last week.
Yes.
All of the legislation, all of the appointments that has killed union labor, not just union labor, but workers in general. What did you say? Over 10,000 COVID complaints in the last 8 months.
And 100 of them were inspected.
Yeah.
12 citations issued.
So it's a good lie.
Yeah.
It's a good lie.
And then in this ad, they talk about forced unionism, which is another just absurd thing, because what they're talking about is they're talking about so-called right to work laws, and how Donald Trump and Tommy Tuberville support so-called right to work laws, which all that is, a right to work law, all that is the big government getting into private contract negotiations between workers and the employer and telling them what they can and cannot put in their employment contract. That's what it is.
It's the exact same thing they campaign on consistently as big government intervention.
It's the government dictating the terms of private employment contracts.
Yep.
And you can't even force, even in non-right to work states, in collective bargaining states, you cannot you still can't have as a condition of employment that non-union members pay dues. They can be, as a condition of employment, pay agency fees, which are less than dues, which which go to the cost of directly to the cost of representation and
contract negotiations.
And contract negotiations. Yeah. And then he talks about how Tommy Tuberville supports the Freedom from Union Violence Act.
Yeah. It's insanity.
Union violence.
Yeah.
Union violence.
How many people have you been violent against in the union, Jacob?
I have never been violent against anyone as a member of the union. But you know who has had violence inflicted on them? Union members.
Yeah.
By cops, by bosses, by Pinkertons, by scabs.
Yeah.
That's who the violence is done against, and you don't see any union members calling for. And what the Freedom from Union Violence Act does is it makes violence in support of unionism like a federal hate crime or something. Like, violence in support of unionism is still violence, and it would still be punished. They just want to tack more onto it. That's all it does. Because violence is still illegal, right? And I mean, it's absurd the things that they're focusing on. Like, in the middle of a pandemic, when we've got...
Not they. Let's be clear here. It's absurd the things that Tommy Tuberville is focusing on.
In the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a recession, when people have lost their unemployment stimulus, when people don't have work to go back to, he's talking about freedom from union violence. Give me a break. Give me a break.
Yeah. What do you expect?
Yeah.
I have come to expect this out of these types of people.
Yeah. I mean,
it's unfortunate.
It's loony. If you want to talk to us, 1-866-494-9866 is the number. 1-866-494-WVNN.
And the biggest problem that you get with this is the fact that who has Tuberville talked to?
Nobody.
There, he puts out all of this stuff, but yet he won't call into our show. He will not do an interview anywhere. He runs. He hides from every media. He hides from his proposed constituents. He don't want to answer any questions. I mean, you have to ask yourself, what's going on? In one of the biggest elections in the state of Alabama right now, I would say the biggest election in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
The candidate refuses to answer questions from his wannabe constituents.
Yeah.
Where's he at?
Yeah.
He's in Florida, I guess. Yeah. He's at his house in Florida, vacationing.
Man, I've got one more story I wanted to talk about. Was there something that you said that there were some things that you brought wanting to talk about? You know the other story that I want to talk about, but we've only got 12 minutes.
Yeah, we got
left.
about 12 minutes. Go ahead, take it away.
You didn't want to talk about one of your things? Okay. So I saw a tweet yesterday from Brett Favre about how he supports President Trump, and whatever, that's fine. But one of the reasons that he said that he supports President Trump is because President Trump supports freedom of speech and freedom of expression. That's one of
I got a funny feeling where we're going here.
Yeah, that's one of the things that he said, I support Donald Trump because he supports freedom of speech, whatever. You want to know how much Donald Trump supports freedom of speech? His National Labor Relations Board this last week put out for public comment on whether or not they should ban Scabby the Rat from demonstrations on picket line for it being coercive. They're trying to Scabby the Rat.
Snowflakes.
No kidding. Scabby the Rat is an inflatable rat that union members take him on picket lines and blow up a big Scabby the Rat to taunt scabs, to taunt people who will cross picket lines and say to them that you're no better than a rat.
We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here.
And so, I'm
no, what I'm saying, the point that I'm trying to make is they're always talking about F your feelings. They're always talking about your feelings don't matter. What if your feelings don't matter? What are you worried about? What are you worried about a giant inflatable rat? Does it really bother you that much that there's an inflatable rat on the side of the road?
They're trying to make it illegal to have a blow-up doll on a in a demonstration. They're trying to make it illegal to have a balloon at a demonstration. Talk to me about freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech.
Talk to me about the First Amendment. The Trump administration, National Labor Relations Board, the body that is supposed to protect workers, the
rights.
body that is supposed to be for workers, protecting us from employer coercion and exploitation, is trying to muzzle us in our demonstrations and trying to say what we can and cannot say. They're literally trying to tell us what we can say, what we can do on picket lines. We're not using this inflatable doll to hit people over the head with it. We're just having it on the line, and they're trying to make that illegal.
Freedom of speech. Just watch what you say.
Yeah.
Freedom of speech.
Yeah. Freedom of speech for
really
people who agree with me.
To government interventionism, and this administration. We got a few more minutes. This administration has constantly attacked freedom of speech and freedom of assembly from the get-go. And a perfect example, when we talk about freedom of speech, a perfect example is what's happened in the past few months. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, Jacob. What was the original intent of the police? Even in slave days, what was the original intent of the police?
It was to capture slaves.
To specifically, you say capture slaves, that's kind of a wide.
Right.
Specifically to protect private property, because slaves were considered private property. And throughout the years, even with the Pinkertons, it was the hired police. It was to protect private property. That is under the capitalist system, that is the entire concept of the police. Is private property is held at the highest esteem above all else. That if you own your home, if you own your land, if you own your guns, that someone cannot just come in and take those away from you. But yet, we have a platform that is private property. What would you consider Twitter a public platform? Does the government own it? Does the people own it?
No.
When you sign up for Twitter, you sign an agreement saying you agree to their terms because they own the platform. But the government, because their ideas are so terrible on the right, are mad and want to take that private property of Twitter and force them to have a voice on their private property. So once again, we have this hypocrisy on the right that I'm for freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, so long as it applies to me and not anyone else. Ted Cruz was absolutely attacking Twitter last week, and it's like, do you pay for Twitter? Does any taxpayer money go to Twitter? Then you have no authority over them. Matter of fact, you should be reimbursing those CEOs for the time that they're having to waste sitting before Congress and listen to this idiot bloviate about how he's being treated unfairly. Guess what? If your policies wasn't so crap, you wouldn't be treated unfairly. That's free market at work. The free market don't care to hear what you have to say. Your policies have been terrible for the working people. So get over it.
Yeah. That's that's capitalism. That's private property.
Yeah.
Free enterprise.
Everything that they cheer on is hypocritical. It makes me sick to my stomach. I don't know if you've seen the video, but that's really what riled me up, because Ted Cruz getting on there and just bloviating and making a scene, and it's like, shut the hell up. Because you've been cheering on free market enterprise for years. Well, now the free market is having their way with you and you don't like it. So you want socialism?
Yeah,
you want to start a government And my understanding is the far right has started several of these platforms. They suck. That's why nobody watches them, because they suck.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly like with the free speech that Brett Favre was talking about. That and then what I mentioned with the NLRB. It's freedom of speech for me, not for thee. Capitalism when it suits me, not when it suits you. Like, it's the principles here are not consistent. And when I say freedom of speech, I say that everybody should have freedom of speech. I say that union members should absolutely have the right to have Scabby the Rat on the picket lines.
If you can put up a billboard on the side of the road advertising for your company, we can put up a rat on the side of the road.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, if some dirty scabs want to have, I don't know,
snowflakes.
Yeah, if they want to have blow up snowflakes when they cross the picket line and take foods out of the mouths of striking workers, let them. I don't, that's fine with me.
Who cares?
That's fine with me. We're not trying to censor them, but the bosses and the scabs are trying to censor union folks, and we've got conservative politician types trying to censor private platforms. Now, I've got a critique of capitalism. I'm not sure that I don't think that the profit motive in every situation is I don't think that the profit motive in every situation incentivizes companies to do what is in the public interest. And I think that that's the case with these social media companies too. And so, I think that there may be a place for nationalization or for regulation of these companies, because I think that they should be made to serve the public interest. But we're going to leave it there, and we're going to talk about.
Man, I apologize.
No, I forgot about it too. I'm glad you mentioned it. Next week, folks, mark your calendars, because next week we are going to be live on location. Anybody can come and talk to us. You can come and yell at us. You can come and have some coffee with us, have some barbecue with us.
Donuts.
Next weekend, donuts in the morning.
Whole 9 yards. It's going to be on.
It's going to be on next weekend, 9 a.m. in the Steam Fitters and Pipe Fitters Union Hall parking lot, 9740 Madison Boulevard, Madison, Alabama.
It's going to be such a fun time.
It's going to be a fun time. We're going to be out there at 9 a.m. We're going to be out there at 9 a.m. We're going to have coffee and donuts as soon as we get there. And then we are going to be live on the air from 9:30 to 11. We're going to continue live streaming till like 1 or 2 or whenever we get bored. We're going to have barbecue for lunch. David is going to smoke some chicken. It is amazing. I'm going to make some hamburgers and cheeseburgers and hot dogs. We're going to have half a dozen or more, 7 or 8 or 9 local unions. I know Federation of Government Employees, machinists, postal workers, letter carriers, professional engineers.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Going to be a lot of folks. If you've got questions for union members in your industry, this is the time to come out and ask them. Meet people who are actually in union workplaces. Talk to them. Talk to us about what it's like, how you can make your life better by forming a union in your workplace from 9 till 1 or 2 or whenever we get bored in the afternoon.
And it's outdoors.
Outdoors,
so
social distancing.
And you don't have to talk about unions if you don't. If you just want to come out and shoot the bull, come out and shoot the bull and get a piece of chicken.
It's going to be fun. Going to be, yeah. Come out, have fun, 9 till whenever we get bored. Steam Fitters and Pipe Fitters Union Hall, 9740 Madison Boulevard, Madison, Alabama. Come out and see us.
Wonderful time.
Live on location.
Hey, it's been a pleasure today.
Yeah,
it's been a real pleasure. We had some great guests on.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Tune in next week. Come out and see us. Tune in on the radio or come out and see us. We'll talk to you next week on the Valley Labor Report.